Hello, everybody, and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. My name is Don Arlett. Today, we welcome Aleksander Cwalina, director at the Eurasia Center of the Atlantic Council, to discuss President Volodymyr Zelensky's meeting, which is just getting underway in the United States in Washington with President Donald Trump. Hello, sir, and thank you very much for joining us today on World Talks.
Oh, glad to be on.
Now, we need to try and filter through the noise because there's quite a bit of it. What do you think are the top priorities for Zelensky going into this meeting, which he just entered right now?
Yes, as you mentioned, the meeting, I believe President Zelensky's motorcade just pulled up to the White House to commence the meeting, after which they'll hold a press briefing on the results of the meeting. However, it seems that the thing at the very top of the list for Zelensky and for President Trump is the long-awaited mineral deal that was much discussed in both capitals this past week. For this deal, Washington hopes to gain access to Kiev's rare earth minerals, including graphite, lithium, titanium, and uranium, which are all critical for electronics, defense, and nuclear industries, as well as oil and gas. In return, the U.S. and Ukraine, hopefully, according to previous drafts on the mineral deal, will establish a reconstruction investment fund for Ukraine. However, one thing remains currently unclear, and that is security guarantees in return for this deal for Ukraine. This is something that has been left out of previous drafts or left vague, and this is something that we hope to see clarity on after the meeting today.
Okay, now some people have commented on this minerals deal, and well, I've heard President Zelensky speak lengthily about it when I was in Kiev last week on Sunday, and well, I think is the assumption that having this deal and going forward and signing it, even though it's not the best for Ukraine in its current form, would this not be some kind of de facto security guarantee by having so much skin in the game, I guess, from the United States? In economic
I think
terms.
it's certainly a positive. Yes, I think it's a positive development because it gives the United States and Washington economic incentive to be interested in Ukraine and for continued investment in Ukraine. And anything that sort of ties both Washington and Kiev together, especially after some of the rocky comments between President Trump and President Zelensky this week, I think is certainly a positive sign. And is initially a positive sign that President Zelensky is currently in Washington. He caps off a rather busy week with both French President Emmanuel Macron and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer also visiting Washington this week. And I think this is not only a sign of continued transatlantic security and dialogue between Washington and Kiev, but also of continued European-Washington dialogue. And as you mentioned, this can come in the forms of not only economy, but also in terms of security.
Right. Now, for a lot of us here in Europe, we're still trying to make sense of the kind of flip-flopping that we've seen. We've seen President Trump come out with what appear to us as very Russian talking points when it comes to all the issues on Ukraine. And now we're seeing something different after Keir Starmer's visit there to Washington. And we've seen President Donald Trump even say, when he was asked by reporters about the dictator statement of Zelensky, he was kind of clueless, saying, "Oh, did I say that?" What do you think? Can you give us some insight to the strategy that we're seeing from the Trump administration? Because it's not just Donald Trump himself; it's many others in his administration. Are they starting to see the light?
I fully agree that the past sort of comments by the jabs on social media between President Trump and President Zelensky have sparked concern in both Washington, Europe, and in Kiev. This originally started due to the U.S.-Russia talks that were in Riyadh earlier this month that left out both European partners and Washington from, and my apologies, and left out Europe from the talks, which sparked concern from Kiev and concern from President Zelensky himself. As you mentioned, he accused President Trump of operating in a Russian disinformation space and borrowing talking points from this space. One topic that came up as a result of this was the concept and the question of wartime elections elections in Ukraine, which remains constitutionally prohibited by Ukraine's constitution at the moment, as well as opposed by a vast majority of citizens and lawmakers in the parliament of Ukraine, including government and opposition lawmakers. But additionally, as you mentioned, the fact that not only Zelensky is currently in Washington, but also that President Trump has sort of walked back his previous comments about calling President Zelensky a dictator, that he is engaged with dialogue with not only Zelensky, but also with other European leaders, I think is promising. And it is also my own belief that this is just another step in sort of President Trump's idiosyncratic, maybe, approach to diplomacy, in the sense that we saw earlier drafts of the mineral deal earlier in the week where much came at a much steeper cost for Ukraine. And once the Ukrainians pushed back, once President Trump spoke with other European leaders, we now see a more equitable or more promising minerals deal come out of those discussions.
And what in particular would you say are the differences between those two agreements? Where has it become more favorable, I would imagine, for Ukraine?
So earlier drafts of the deal showed that 50% of revenues of Ukraine's state-owned industries were going to go to the United States, and this it's important to note that this would initially would have not been profits, but out of revenues, and this came in as a big surprise for our friends in Kiev, in the sense that this had a real possibility of bankrupting or severely financially undermining a lot of these industries in Ukraine, which are a vital part of Ukraine's economy. And that would have sparked concern. That would have taken a long time to pay back. And it would have been a big step back for Ukraine's eventual reconstruction and rebuilding, as that would have severely hobbled Ukraine's economy. Now that's shifted to U.S. and Ukraine establishing the Reconstruction and Investment Fund, and 50% of revenues from Ukraine's state-owned industries going into that fund, which will be jointly managed by U.S. and Ukraine. And I think this is a much better step forward, that not only it gives room for Ukraine to keep that money within its own borders, but also use it for future infrastructure and rebuilding and security.
Now, when it comes to security concerns, what is likely for President Zelensky and his staff that are with him in this meeting? What do you think that they're going to push for, and what would be, I guess, fathomable for the Trump administration in terms of proposals from the Ukrainian side?
One of the, sort of to connect a little bit to the minerals deal, one of the concerns with the minerals deals as it stands is it doesn't really come with security guarantees right now. It is important to note that a lot of these vital rare earth minerals deposits are located within Russian-occupied territory in Ukraine, and the ones that aren't are under constant threat of drone and artillery bombardment, which leaves the question of how those resources will get out of the ground and how they will benefit both the Ukrainian and American economy in question. On other visions for security for Ukraine, this is where I think French President Emmanuel Macron's and Prime Minister Keir Starmer's visits to Washington were crucial, because it seems from the Trump administration that the main push is for Europe to take the lead on a possible ceasefire, which might include up to 30,000 troops on the ground in Ukraine. Now, this remains a controversial topic amongst many European capitals, but amongst the citizens of many member states. This is something that Moscow has said is off the table, but that also that we have received mixed signals from the Trump administration on whether or not Moscow would be okay with this. Currently, as it stands, France and the UK have not committed troops to Ukraine in a potential ceasefire. Turkey has actually come out this past week as being open to sending troops in a possible ceasefire as peacekeeping troops. So this remains a question, but this remains a question that is being actively discussed. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen not reiterated, but she mentioned that there will be a emergency summit on March 6th to discuss next steps for Ukraine and Europe's security. And this is something that I recommend watching for additional follow-up clarity on what a eventual ceasefire, what eventual peacekeeping forces might look like.
Well, right. And the initial statement by President Trump and his administration was that there was going to be no backing, that this peacekeeping mission would not fall under NATO nor Article 5. But Keir Starmer was in Washington and pretty much, and I believe French President Emmanuel Macron was saying the same thing, that there needs to be some kind of American backstop. So perhaps we'll get some information on that. I mean, could America give some kind of security under guarantees that don't fall necessarily underneath NATO or Article 5, but gives some credibility or gives some, I don't know, confidence for the UK and for France to send troops essentially into harm's way?
There is multiple discussions currently going on in Washington about what an eventual U.S. role in maintaining a ceasefire and security for Ukraine might look like. Washington still is one of the major providers of arms and ammunition to Ukraine, and there have been discussions about a possible air deployment or air support in maintaining this possible ceasefire or peacekeeping force. That would not necessarily include American troops on the ground, but rather more involve your American equipment on the ground, more or either more of or more specific equipment that could be useful in maintaining such a ceasefire. This is one of the talking points that many speculate in Washington will be at the very front of the discussions between President Zelenskyy and President Trump. So that as currently, I believe, a space that many should continue watching, especially what happens after the press briefing following the meeting. But it is being discussed, and hopefully it's going to move to a direction that maintains a stable and secure peace for Ukraine.
Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, Ukraine has been pushing for a no-fly zone over Ukraine. Do you think that that would be feasible under a ceasefire and potential peacekeepers being deployed? Would this be a critical element of maintaining peace there between Russia and Ukraine?
I believe a lot of the concerns with a no-fly zone remain as the same as the first discussions about a no-fly zone at the beginning of the full-scale invasion. Primarily, what will happen if, for example, a Russian anti-air missile hits a NATO-allied aircraft? And I think that those questions will continue. And those questions hopefully will also be discussed about what a possible peace deal between Russia and Ukraine and the United States' role in either maintaining a no-fly zone or in maintaining troops on the ground or supporting troops on the ground that are maybe allied to the United States might look like. Currently, it's uncertain where discussions on a no-fly zone might look like, but from my point of view, the many of the same concerns remain as in the discussions just prior and during the early months of the full-scale invasion.
Okay, now to conclude here, I'd like to run back to this minerals deal that is potentially about to be signed there in Washington. You mentioned how it would benefit the U.S. and the Ukrainian economy. When we look at what experts say, what is needed to, and you rightly pointed out, the areas where these minerals are either in occupied territories or they're along the front lines, which makes it not really very feasible investment opportunity at the moment, but also the length of these investments. I've seen sources say that it could take up to 18 years to build a mine, and this could cost $500 million to $1 billion. So when we're looking at how this can fund, say, Ukraine's ongoing war efforts, how it can repay the United States government, or how it can pay for future armaments, is this time frame of getting these mines going, is this something that's just kind of being avoided right now and not talked about, that this isn't going to provide immediate relief right now?
I think the sooner a partnership on the rare earths minerals and then the mines can get started, the better. And this is hopefully a positive sign that the discussions on that are already underway, with more concrete sort of mapping out of which resources where and the timelines being discussed at a later date, hopefully soon. I think one of the biggest pushes for this rare earths and mineral deals is part of the Trump administration's long-term strategy towards China. As China controls a vast majority of the Earth's rare earth minerals, um, which include lithium, graphite, uranium, titanium. These are all minerals that are used in the defense industries, in consumer and military electronics, and defense industries. And I think this might be an example of a more long-term strategy to sort of bring more of these resources to countries that are friendly of the United States, and to sort of diversify away from China, because China has shown, Beijing in particular has shown that it does not shy away from restricting these resources from countries that are unfriendly, and sort of the United States partnering with Ukraine on the production and the extraction of these critical minerals. For example, Ukraine controls 3% of lithium, 6% of global graphite reserves, and I think this is not a number that is easy to ignore or to look over. And I think any sort of, even if it takes 18 years, as you mentioned, is any sort of effort towards this will be mutually beneficial, not only for Ukraine, but also for long-term Western strategy vis-a-vis Russia and China.
A shimmer of light out there on the horizon. Aleksander Cwalina, director of the Eurasia Center at the Atlantic Council. Thank you very much for joining me. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that concludes this edition of World Talks. Thank you all for joining us, and stay with us for more here on TVP World.